Dr. Zara Chen stared at the holographic readout floating above her workstation, squinting at the numbers that absolutely refused to make sense. She tapped her fingers against the crystalline surface of her desk, a habit that made Science Officer Blirp's gelatinous form quiver with annoyance every single time. Would the human please cease their repetitive percussion? Blirp's translation matrix rendered their clicks and bubbles into standard galactic with just a hint of pretentious superiority. Would the human please cease their repetitive percussion? Zara mimicked under her breath, rolling her eyes. Would the gelatinous mass please cease their constant jiggling? We all have our quirks, Blirp. The science officer's translucent form shifted through several shades of disapproving purple before settling back to its usual azure hue. Just another typical day aboard the Galactic Science Vessel Curiosity's Edge, the most advanced research vessel in the Galactic Union's fleet and, ironically, home to the most backwards crew relationships since humans joined the spacefaring community. Captain V.A. Lax's mandibles clicked as they entered the research bay, compound eyes reflecting the holographic displays in a kaleidoscope of data. Status report, Dr. Chen. Well, Captain, either our sensors are malfunctioning in the most spectacular way possible, or we've just discovered something that breaks about 15 laws of physics before breakfast. Zara expanded the holographic display with a gesture, highlighting a region of seemingly empty space. See this? According to our readings, this sector of space is simultaneously there and not there, which is, fun. The captain's antennae twitched, a sign Zara had learned meant either deep thought or mild indigestion. With V.A. Lax, it was sometimes hard to tell the difference. Explain in terms that won't give our engineering team another existential crisis, Lax mandated. From the corner of the research bay, Engineer Keix's crystalline form vibrated in what Zara had come to recognize as their version of a nervous tic. Poor Keix had spent 3 cycles in maintenance meditation after Zara's last explanation of quantum tunneling. Right, dumbing it down for the non-Deathworlders, Zara muttered, earning a sharp look from the captain. Sorry. Professional mode engaged. Imagine space as a piece of fabric, and someone's pinching it from both sides while also trying to turn it inside out through itself. That's what we're looking at, except the someone is apparently the universe having a midlife crisis. Blirp oozed closer to the display, their surface rippling with calculation patterns. Impossible. The energy requirements for such a spatial distortion would be astronomical. Universe breaking? Completely bonkers. Zara finished for them, her grin widening. Yeah, welcome to my morning. But the readings are consistent across all our sensors, and she paused, watching as new data scrolled across her screen. Her grin faltered. Oh, that's not good. Define not good, V.A. Lax demanded, all 4 arms tensing. Remember how I said it was like space was being pinched? Well, now it's less of a pinch and more of a violent twist. The gravitational readings are spiking in patterns I've only seen in theoretical models of. Zara's eyes widened as the implications hit her. Everyone, I think we just discovered a black hole being born. The research bay erupted into chaos. Keix's crystalline form began emitting a high-pitched harmonic of distress. Blirp literally lost cohesion and had to rapidly pull themselves back together, and Captain V.A. Lax's mandibles clacked rapidly enough to sound like tap dancing. How long? The captain demanded. Zara's fingers flew over her console, calculations streaming through her mind. Based on these readings, we've got maybe 6 hours before this baby goes from theoretical physics lecture to real-world catastrophe. And considering we're well within its theoretical gravity well. She looked up at her alien colleagues, forcing herself to maintain a calm demeanor despite the situation. We might want to consider updating our insurance policies. The captain's antennae went completely still, never a good sign. Dr. Chen, I need options. Well, Zara leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms with a smirk that had gotten her into and occasionally out of trouble since her academy days. How do you feel about completely insane plans that probably violate several laws of physics and definitely violate galactic safety protocols? V.A. Lax's mandibles twitched in what Zara had learned to recognize as their version of a resigned sigh. Why do I have the feeling this plan will involve something uniquely human? Because, Captain. Zara's grin turned predatory. Sometimes you need a Deathworlder's perspective to survive something that's literally designed to be unsurvivable. The thing about being a Deathworlder in the Galactic Union was that no one ever let you forget it. Humans had joined the interstellar community relatively late, and their first contact had been memorable. The Galactic Union's initial survey team had taken one look at Earth's gravity, atmospheric composition, and the sheer number of things that could kill you there, declared it a Class 12 death world, and promptly needed the equivalent of alien-smelling salts when they realized intelligent life had evolved there. Zara still kept a framed copy of the first contact report in her quarters. Her favorite part was the section that read, "The indigenous dominant species appears to consume known neurotoxins for pleasure, see caffeine, capsaicin, and deliberately seeks out activities that risk bodily harm for entertainment." The multiple exclamation points in the margins never failed to make her laugh. Dr. Chen, Captain V.A. Lax's voice pulled her from her reminiscing. "Your plan? Preferably before we become part of the most interesting astronomical phenomenon in this sector." "Right. Sorry." Zara pulled up the ship's schematics. "But first, you need to understand why this plan will work, and that means understanding why humans are particularly suited for this brand of insanity." Engineer Keix's crystalline form shifted, refracting light in patterns that indicated curiosity. Their translated voice chimed like wind through glass. "We are aware of human resilience. Your species survives conditions that would shatter my form or disperse Officer Blirp's cohesion." "That's putting it mildly," Blirp bubbled, their form still showing traces of anxiety-induced instability. "Humans regularly expose themselves to temperature variations that would destabilize most species' molecular structures. They can survive rapid pressure changes, radiation levels that should be lethal, and impact forces that would terminate most sentient life." "Oh, you guys have been reading up on us." Zara clutched her chest in mock emotion. "I'm touched. But you're missing the most important part. We're not just tough. We're adaptable. And more importantly," she grinned, "we're really good at improvising when everything goes wrong." The ship's artificial gravity hiccuped, causing everyone except Zara to momentarily lose their orientation. She'd grown up in variable gravity environments on space stations, another weird human thing that had earned her side eyes from her alien colleagues. Captain V.A. Lax steadied themselves using all four arms. The mission parameters were simple: investigate gravitational anomalies in the Carina sector. Nowhere in those parameters was there mention of witnessing the birth of a singularity. "Well, technically we're exceeding mission expectations," then Zara offered brightly. "Instead of just studying gravitational anomalies, we're getting front row seats to the biggest gravitational anomaly possible. That's got to be worth some extra research credits, right?" The look V.A. Lax gave her could have melted Dura steel. The Curiosity's edge was designed for long-range observation and data collection, not this. "And that's exactly why they put a human on board," Zara countered, pulling up more detailed schematics. "Because humans have this funny habit of surviving situations our ships aren't designed for." The ship shuddered again, and this time several non-essential systems flickered. Engineer Keix's surface facets darkened with concern. "The gravitational stresses are already exceeding our structural compensation limits. The primary drive core is showing signs of misalignment." "Which brings us to why this mission went wrong in the most interesting way possible," Zara continued, highlighting several sections of the ship. "We're in a unique position to study something that's never been directly observed before. The birth of a black hole usually happens too fast for any meaningful data collection. But this is a slow-motion cosmic disaster, and we're sitting in the front row." "Your enthusiasm for our potential demise is concerning," Blirp noted, their surface rippling with what might have been exasperation. "Oh, please. If I got concerned every time I was about to die, I'd never get any work done," Zara waved dismissively. "Besides, this ship has something no other research vessel in the fleet has." "A potentially unstable human," Va Lax suggested dryly. "Close. It has a human who understands exactly how much abuse this ship can take because I helped design its emergency protocols." Zara's grin turned slightly manic. "Did anyone ever wonder why I insisted on those seemingly redundant backup systems? The ones rated for pressures and stresses way beyond our normal operational parameters." Understanding dawned in V.A. Lax's compound eyes. "You predicted something like this might happen." Not this exactly, Zara admitted. But humans have this saying, hope for the best, plan for the worst, and expect something completely different. I just made sure we had systems in place that could handle creative solutions. The ship's lights flickered again, and a low groaning sound echoed through the hull. Kykes' crystalline form vibrated in harmonic distress. The structural integrity field is at 60% capacity and dropping. Whatever plan you have, Dr. Chen, I suggest implementing it soon. Don't worry, Zara said, pulling up a final set of schematics with a flourish. I've got a plan that's either going to get us all killed or make us famous in the scientific community. Possibly both. Who's ready to make history? The three aliens exchanged looks that transcended species barriers, the universal expression of why did we let a human on board that Zara had grown quite familiar with over her career. Very well, Dr. Vialax said, mandibles set in determination. Show us this plan of yours. But please, try to keep the human enthusiasm for death-defying stunts to a minimum. Captain Zara replied with a wink. Where would be the fun in that? The first sign that things were about to go from theoretically interesting to oh shit was when Zara's coffee cup slid across her desk. Not toward the floor, toward the ceiling. Well, that's new, she commented, watching the liquid float upward in a perfect sphere. Hey Blirp, remember when you said the gravitational calculations couldn't possibly get worse? The amorphous scientist's surface rippled with chromatic patterns of distress. Now is not the time for human sarcasm, Dr. Chen. On the contrary, Zara replied, strapping herself into her station as warning klaxons began to blare. Human sarcasm might be the only thing keeping me from having a perfectly reasonable panic attack right now. The view screens showed what their instruments had been warning them about for the last hour. Space itself was beginning to visibly distort, like someone had grabbed the fabric of reality and started to wring it out like a wet towel. The effect was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying, much like most things that were about to kill you in space. Primary systems failing. Engineer Kykes' crystalline form was vibrating so fast they were practically a blur. Gravitational shear is exceeding all safety parameters. You don't say, Zara muttered, fingers flying over her console. I thought the laws of physics taking a vacation was perfectly normal for a Tuesday. Captain Vialax's mandibles clattered in what Zara had learned was their version of a stress response. All hands, emergency stations. Engineering, divert all available power to the structural integrity fields. The ship groaned like a living thing, its hull straining against forces it was never designed to withstand. Around them, equipment not bolted down began to float, caught in the competing gravitational fields. A toolbox flew past Zara's head, missing her by inches. Okay, that was just rude, she commented, ducking as more debris joined the impromptu zero-G ballet. Kykes, what's our structural integrity at? 43%, and dropping. The engineer's voice had risen several octaves. The backup generators are overloading, trying to compensate. Zara watched as the readings on her screen went from bad to impossible. The nascent black hole was forming faster than their models had predicted, which was exactly the kind of overachiever behavior she'd come to expect from cosmic disasters. We're losing containment in the lower decks. Blirp's usually smooth surface was roiling like a stormy sea. The gravitational shear is causing microfractures in the hull. Those are just speed holes, Zara quipped, earning bewildered looks from her alien colleagues. Never mind, human joke. Captain, we need to implement my plan now, or we're going to have a lot more holes to worry about. A violent shudder ran through the ship, and several consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, causing everyone except Zara to flail in their restraints. Her childhood on rotating space stations was proving surprisingly useful. Your plan involves manually reconfiguring the drive core to create a localized gravitational field that might counteract the black hole's pull, Vialax stated, antennae twitching frantically. The radiation levels in engineering are already at lethal levels for most species. Good thing I'm not most species then, Zara grinned, already unstrapping herself. Humans are surprisingly radiation resistant compared to most Galactic Union species. Something about evolving on a planet that bombards us with radiation daily. The G-forces in the maintenance tunnels will be extreme, Kykes chimed in, their crystalline form showing stress fractures from the gravitational forces. Even if you survive the radiation, the pressure could crush you. Please, Zara scoffed, pulling on an emergency pressure suit. I grew up doing high-G maneuvers for fun. You should see human roller coasters, they'd give your safety officers nightmares. Another violent shudder rocked the ship, and the lights went out completely before the emergency systems kicked in, bathing everything in an ominous red glow. Warning messages scrolled across every functional screen in at least 12 different languages. Structural integrity at 28%. Kykes' voice had taken on a harmonic of pure panic. We have multiple hull breaches on decks 3 through 7. Emergency bulkheads holding Blirp reported, their forms stretched thin by the gravitational forces. But we're losing atmosphere in sections 4 and 6. Time to do something stupid, Zara announced cheerfully, checking her suit seals. Captain, I'm going to need you to trust me, even when what I'm about to do looks completely insane. Dr. Chen Lax replied, all four hands gripping their command chair. Everything humans do looks completely insane to us. Why should this be any different? That's the spirit. Zara gave a thumbs up, another human gesture that had always puzzled her alien colleagues. Kykes, I need you to reroute all remaining power to the sections I'm about to mark. Blirp. Start calculating the gravitational vectors I'm sending to your station. And Captain, maybe pray to whatever cosmic entities your species believes in. We're about to attempt something that's either brilliant or suicidal. With humans, those often appear to be the same thing, Lax observed dryly. The ship lurched again, and Zara could feel the artificial gravity struggling to compensate. Through the viewports, space itself seemed to be bending, light distorting in ways that made her eyes hurt. The black hole was no longer just being born, it was throwing a tantrum. Structural integrity at 15%. Kykes' warning was almost lost in the sound of groaning metal. That's my cue, Zara said, securing her helmet. If anyone needs me, I'll be in the maintenance tunnels, probably violating several laws of physics and definitely violating all known safety protocols. She headed for the access hatch, pausing only when Captain Lax called out to her. Dr. Chen? Why are you smiling? Zara turned back, her grin visible through her helmet visor. Because, Captain, this is exactly the kind of impossible situation humans live for. When everything's going wrong, when the odds are impossible, when every logical analysis says we should be dead, that's when we humans do our best work. With that, she pulled herself into the maintenance shaft, using the shifting gravity to propel herself forward. Behind her, she could hear Blirp's translated voice. I will never understand how a species can evolve to be simultaneously so terrifying and so enthusiastic about potential death. That's because you've never been to Earth, Zara called back. Everything there is trying to kill you. We just learned to enjoy the challenge. As she disappeared into the ship's innards, the last thing she heard was Captain Lax's resigned comment note for future reference when recruiting crew members. Perhaps we should be more specific about the difference between qualified and crazy enough to volunteer. The maintenance tunnel was a nightmare of shifting gravity and screaming metal. For anyone else, it would have been a death trap. For Zara, it was Thursday. Status report, she called through her comm, bracing herself against another gravity wave that tried to turn her into a pancake. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, Blirp's voice crackled through the static. Possibly both. Aw, you're finally understanding humans, Zara grunted, pulling herself through a particularly tight junction. The gravitational forces were getting worse. She could feel the blood rushing to her head, then her feet, then sideways as space continued its impression of a drunk gymnast. All integrity, at 12%. Kykes' harmonic voice was reaching frequencies that probably weren't good for their crystalline structure. The drive core is approaching critical failure. Perfect. Zara's enthusiasm earned her several seconds of stunned silence from her colleagues. Dr. Chen, Captain Lax's voice was strained. Please explain how our imminent destruction is perfect. Because, Zara explained, reaching a junction that was definitely not meant to accommodate a human in a pressure suit, we're going to use that potential failure as part of the solution. Remember those redundant systems I installed? Time to see why humans always have a backup for their backup. She pulled herself through the junction, ignoring the way her bones creaked under the pressure. The radiation warning on her suit was screaming. but she'd taken her anti-rad meds. Probably. She was pretty sure she had anyway. Accessing primary engineering controls now, she announced, reaching a maintenance panel. Hey kayaks, remember when you said these manual overrides were primitive and unnecessary? I apologize for doubting human engineering paranoia, the engineer replied. But how does this help us? Watch and learn. Zara began rerouting power through systems that were definitely not meant to be connected. Humans have this great tradition called jury rigging. It's when you take things that weren't meant to work together and make them work together through sheer stubborn determination and a complete disregard for warranty agreements. The ship shuddered violently, and Zara heard something that sounded suspiciously like a major structural beam, giving up on life. Whatever you're doing, do it faster. Blirp's usually composed voice had risen several octaves. The black hole's gravitational field is increasing exponentially. You know what would make this easier? Zara grunted, manually forcing a power coupling into place. If someone had listened to my suggestion about installing emergency handles in these tunnels. We did not anticipate anyone being crazy enough to manually access these systems during a crisis, Lax responded. Clearly Zara wheezed, fighting against forces that were trying to pull her in 6 different directions at once. You needed more humans on your design team. Now, watch this. She yanked a final cable free and jammed it into a port that technically wasn't compatible. The resulting shower of sparks would have worried someone with a proper sense of self-preservation. Did you just? Kykes's voice trailed off in horror. Those systems aren't rated for that kind of power transfer. Rated capacity is more of a suggestion than a rule, Zara replied cheerfully, pulling herself toward the next junction. Like speed limits, or those signs that say do not feed the animals. The ship groaned, and for a moment, everything went weightless. Then gravity returned with a vengeance, trying to pull them in what felt like every direction at once. Phase 1 complete, Zara announced. Now for the fun part. Captain, remember those emergency thrusters I insisted on installing? The ones you said were unnecessarily redundant. I'm beginning to sense a pattern in your design modifications, Lax replied dryly. Time to light them up. Zara reached the auxiliary control panel, her fingers flying over the controls. Blirp, I need those gravitational vectors now. Calculating, the scientist's voice was strained. But the numbers make no sense. You can't possibly. Rule 1 of working with humans, Zara interrupted. Never tell us something's impossible. We take it as a personal challenge. She began initiating sequences that made every safety protocol in the system scream in digital agony. The emergency thrusters, combined with the jury-rigged power system, created a counter-gravitational field that, by all normal physics, should have torn the ship apart. The hull kikes began. Is fine, Zara assured them, even as warning lights indicated it very much wasn't. Mostly fine. Fine adjacent. Look, in human engineering, we have this concept called good enough. The ship shuddered again, but this time differently. Instead of being pulled apart, it felt like it was being squeezed from all sides. It's working, Blirp exclaimed, their surprise evident even through the static. The gravitational shear is stabilizing, but how? Remember those primitive mechanical backups I installed? Zara was grinning so hard her face hurt. Turns out sometimes the old ways are the best ways. No fancy computers to fail, no complex systems to overload, just good old-fashioned mechanical switches and manual overrides. You're using the black hole's own gravitational field against itself, Lax realized. The emergency thrusters are creating a counterforce, while the rerouted power is reinforcing our structural integrity field. Bingo, Zara cheered, then immediately regretted it as another gravity wave tried to rearrange her internal organs. Though I might have slightly bent the laws of physics to make it work. Don't tell my old physics professor he's still mad about that paper I wrote on theoretical faster-than-light travel. The ship's systems were screaming, but they were holding. Slowly, agonizingly, they began to pull away from the event horizon. Hull integrity stabilizing at 24%, Kikes reported, their voice modulating with relief. We're actually going to survive this. Never doubt human ingenuity, Zara replied, finally allowing herself to feel the bone-deep exhaustion, or human stubbornness. or human ability to ignore warning labels. Actually, just never doubt humans when our backs are against the wall. As they limped away from the newly formed black hole, Zara could hear the stunned silence from her alien colleagues. Finally, Captain Lax spoke. Dr. Chen, your solution involved manually rerouting power systems in lethal radiation conditions, ignoring every safety protocol in the manual, and essentially turning our research vessel into a gravitational slingshot using technology you installed without properly documenting it in the ship's specifications. That's a fair summary, yes. It was reckless, dangerous, and completely insane. Thank you. That wasn't meant as a compliment. Too late, I'm taking it as one. Zara began making her way back through the maintenance tunnels. Now, if nobody minds, I'm going to go throw up from radiation exposure and G-force stress. Don't worry, it's a normal human response. Probably 3 days after their unlikely escape from the black hole, Zara sat in the ship's medical bay, enduring her 14th decontamination procedure while simultaneously trying to file her incident report. The ship's medical AI was having what could only be described as a nervous breakdown. Patient shows concerning levels of radiation exposure, multiple microfractures, and elevated stress hormones. The AI droned. Recommended treatment: immediate cryogenic suspension. Override that recommendation, Zara said cheerfully, not looking up from her report. Human baseline physiology, remember. But the readings are perfectly normal for a human who's had an exciting week. She took a sip from her coffee, ignoring the AI's distressed beeping about caffeine consumption during recovery. Captain Lax entered the medical bay, all 4 arms clutching different data pads. Dr. Chen, I've just finished reviewing your creative interpretation of our emergency protocols. Find anything interesting? Zara grinned, still tapping away at her report. 17 previously undocumented system modifications, 32 emergency backup installations, and what appears to be a completely unauthorized coffee maker in the auxiliary control room. In my defense, Zara raised a finger, that last one proved crucial to our survival. You can't expect a human to save a ship from a black hole without caffeine. Lax's mandibles twitched in what Zara had learned was their version of suppressed amusement. The Galactic Science Council has reviewed our preliminary report. They've created 3 new safety protocols specifically because of this incident. They're calling them the Chen protocols. I'm honored. What do they say? Protocol 1: all human crew members must fully document any modifications to ship systems, no matter how unnecessarily redundant they may seem. Boring. Protocol 2: emergency backup systems should be designed with the assumption that someone might need to access them while experiencing 17 different types of gravitational shear. Now you're getting it. Protocol 3: if a human crew member describes a plan as crazy enough to work, all non-human crew members should evacuate to a safe distance. Zara burst out laughing, then winced as her recently realigned ribs protested. Now that's just good sense. Blirp oozed into the medical bay, their surface showing patterns of what Zara had learned to recognize as embarrassment. Dr. Chen, that is to say. Spit it out, Blirp. Well, figuratively speaking, since you don't actually have a mouth. We were wrong about human methods being primitive, the scientist finally managed. Your redundant systems and unnecessarily complicated backup procedures saved all our lives. And Keeks added, entering with a crystalline chime, we have analyzed the data we collected during the incident. Your crazy solution has provided us with the most detailed observations of black hole formation ever recorded. Zara beamed. Sometimes you need a little human crazy to advance science. Speaking of which, who's up for studying that quantum anomaly we detected in Sector 7? The collective groan from her alien colleagues was music to her ears. Too soon, she asked innocently. Dr. Chen Lax said firmly, you are still recovering from radiation exposure, gravitational stress, and what the medical AI describes as concerning levels of caffeine toxicity. Exactly. I'm in perfect shape for another adventure. The captain's antennae drooped in resignation. I am beginning to understand why humans have spread so quickly through the galaxy. It's not because you're adaptable or resilient. It's because the universe has learned it's easier to just give you what you want than to deal with your particular brand of insanity. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Zara wiped away an imaginary tear. Now, about that quantum anomaly. No. But. No. Fine, Zara sighed dramatically. But just wait until I tell you about my ideas for upgrading the ship's drive core. I've got these great plans involving a rubber band and something humans call duct tape. The sound of her alien colleagues fleeing the medical bay was answered only by her laughter, and the medical AI's continued distressed beeping about her vital signs. And that's how a human saved our ship, using emergency systems she installed without telling anyone. Blirp's gelatinous form rippled with enthusiasm as they finished the story, their drink creating interesting patterns as it was absorbed through their membrane. The Stellar Drift Lounge was packed with various species, most of whom had gathered around to hear the now famous tale of the Curiosity's Edge and its encounter with a forming black hole. The story had gained quite a following in the scientific community, though the details seemed to get more outrageous with each telling. Impossible, a silicon-based being scoffed, their crystalline structure glowing with skepticism. No organic creature could survive those radiation levels. That's what I said, Kikes chimed in, their own crystalline form still showing traces of the stress fractures from their adventure. But humans are different. Different. Captain Valax clicked their mandibles in amusement. That's a diplomatic way of putting it. Did you know they actually seek out high-gravity environments for entertainment? They call it roller coasting. Roller coasters, Zara corrected from her corner of the bar, where she was currently introducing a group of horrified xenobiologists to the concept of hot sauce. And they're fun. You should try them sometime. We value our molecular cohesion. Thank you, Blirp bubbled. A newly commissioned science officer from the Galactic Fleet approached their table, all 6 eyes wide with curiosity. Is it true what they say? That the human manually rerouted power through radiation-flooded sections while making jokes about warranty violations? Oh, that's not even the craziest part. Valax leaned in conspiratorially. Wait until you hear about the coffee maker she installed in the auxiliary control room. Apparently it was crucial to survival. It was. Zara called out. You try saving a ship from a black hole without caffeine. The bar erupted in laughter, though several species quickly checked their xenobiology databases to understand what caffeine was. Their horror only grew. They drink that voluntarily, the silicon being whispered. Humans, Valax explained with newfound wisdom, are the galaxy's way of reminding us that the impossible is merely improbable if you're crazy enough to try it. To humans, Blirp raised their glass, their surface shimmering with affection. The galaxy's certified lunatics. To humans, the crowd echoed. Hey, Zara protested good-naturedly. We prefer the term professionally insane. We worked hard for those certifications. As the laughter died down, a young alien cadet approached their table. Captain Valax, is the Curiosity's Edge accepting new crew members? I'd love to work with a human. Valax's antennae twitched in amusement. Well, that depends. How do you feel about unauthorized system modifications and something humans call duct tape? And coffee, Zara added helpfully. Don't forget the coffee. Galaxy help us all. Valax sighed, but their mandibles were clicked in a smile. We've started a trend. You're welcome, Zara grinned, already planning her next set of totally necessary ship modifications. After all, there was a mysterious quantum anomaly in Sector 7 that needed investigating.